We are live. Hi, friends. We're doing office hours on this beautiful, oh, shoot, restarting your computer. Your computer will restart in 55 seconds to install updates. No, how about trying an hour? Let's do that. Oh, that would have been funny. Okay, anyway, yeah, office hours. Let me share my screen here real quick. Let me know if you cannot see my screen. So we are every week answering questions here. So yeah, lots of it is about my content, but most of it's actually not. It has nothing to do with my content, just general questions. And the questions come from this Discord channel. And yeah, so if you want to ask a question, then come on over to the kcd.im/discord and come to the KCD office hours here. You can follow me to be notified whenever I start office hours by raising your hand right here. And so when I start office hours, you'll be notified. Or if you don't want to be notified every time I start one of these meetups, like for my live streams and stuff, then you can raise your hand just on the office hours. Yeah, and then I just answer the questions that are in here. But first I answer the questions of people who are actually in the Zoom call. So if you really want to get your question answered, you'll want to be here during the Zoom call. So with that, what questions do y'all have for me?
So Ken, this is Naresh. I have a question lined up already in your thing.
Yes, I noticed you posted, but I haven't had a chance to read. I'll read it really quick for you.
Okay.
Multiple ways of doing snapshot testing. What's the difference? Okay, yeah, great. So I do have a blog post about this, and it is kcd.im/snapshots, where I talk about effective use of snapshot testing. I pretty much like the TLDR is I don't use snapshot testing for React components most of the time. I don't find it to be very useful. What typically ends up happening is you snapshot like a ton of stuff, and then any change will invalidate the snapshot. You have to update it. And often there will be many snapshots updated when you're relying heavily on snapshots. And so reviewing that is very difficult, and people typically don't. They just don't review it very well. And so they give you a false sense of security. And so what I recommend is instead of snapshotting something big, you snapshot something small, just the part that's relevant, the thing that you care about. And then those reviews aren't quite so bad. But what happens when you snapshot smaller and smaller things and just say, oh, you know, I don't care about the label and stuff. I'm only interested in, you know, the error message. You keep snapshotting lower and lower until you get down to something that actually could just be an assertion, just a regular assertion. You don't need a snapshot. So I do use snapshots, absolutely, especially actually for error messages. That's one that I use snapshots for quite a bit. Yeah, typically I don't use snapshots much.
Okay, I got the impression from this that for smaller components it's okay to do that. So for like a header bar or something, I will take a snapshot usually. And
yeah,
you know, all I'm trying to see is everything in its place, you know?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of value in those types of tests.
Okay.
But yeah, often the snapshot looks exactly like the code. And so it's like, I changed the code, now the snapshot needs to change. There's not a lot of value there.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you're doing a lot of logic and stuff, then maybe, but your test is normally going to say, okay, if I pass it this prop, then this class name changes. Well, instead of snapshotting the whole thing, just assert on the class name, right? So it's really rare that I find a really useful use case for snapshots with React components. That doesn't really answer your question though. I kind of sidestepped it. Your question was like, what's the difference in use cases?
Yes.
So I do want to address that. So if you are going to snapshot, with using React Test Renderer, you take this component, you make it JSON, and then you say to match snapshot. That's going to fill your snapshots with implementation details, like what props are being passed and all sorts of things that the user never experiences. What the user experiences is the DOM that's generated based on all of these props and everything. And so I would really recommend against using React Test Renderer and doing to-match snapshot. Otherwise, you literally will break the snapshot anytime you do anything with this code, which makes it very useless. With React testing library as fragment, versus using the container. So both of these, you're going to get DOM. The difference is that I actually don't remember. I didn't add as fragment, but I do remember having, and because I don't use snapshots a lot, I'm not as familiar with the reason. But I seem to remember that when I tried to do a diff, so like one thing that I mentioned in my article is you can use a, no, I should probably just pull it up. I think it's, yeah, diff something.
Yeah,
Diff.
to snapshot diff or something like that.
Yeah, snapshot diff. So this is actually kind of an interesting idea where you can say, hey, let's take a snapshot before, we'll take a snapshot after, or let's take a before and after, and then we will take a diff of those two things. It'll basically be a snapshot diff. That's why it's called what it is. And so that can kind of be useful because it narrows down what is in the snapshot just to the relevant stuff. So you say, here's my prompt before, here's the prompt after, and here's the difference between the before and after. Like that's the important stuff. That can kind of be useful. And I feel like with this, I found problems where it would, if you didn't use as fragment, some state in the DOM would get shared between the before and after somehow or something. I think that's what as fragment was created to solve. You might check the docs. Like I said, I wasn't the one who created the as fragment API. So I'd have to look at the docs to figure out why. But with all of that said, if you are going to snapshot, I think you're probably better off to use as fragment because that's pretty much what it was created for. So
got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else here in the Zoom have a question before I go scrolling around in here?
Yeah, I do. So
Great.
I ran into a situation where somebody was using just in case on the front end for testing like different URLs through the router DOM, and I'm kind of trying to like come to terms with using just in case. I was Braden actually mentioned that you bring it up in the testing JavaScript course, and your use case was kind of in the back end for like cleaning up like very repetitive testing that's basically testing the same predicate over and over again.
Yeah.
I'm looking for like good reason to keep using that and not hate it.
Yeah. Well, Jacob, you need to get testingjavascript.com because I explain the whole, like, here's why it's so awesome. But I'll just give you a brief summary. I don't think that I've ever used it for testing React stuff. I pretty much use this for pure functions that are pretty, well, actually, here, you want to see something kind of nasty? I'm not sure I love this, but just for the fun of it, KCD scripts is the foundation for all of my open source libraries. For those who don't know, everything is using KCD scripts, and even some of my workshop material is using KCD scripts, but it is very poorly tested. There are, interestingly, I should probably test it, should probably rewrite it to TypeScript at some point.
We could raid that for you.
Yeah, if you want to, yeah, you're more than welcome to. It's a kind of a tricky one to test, honestly. I feel like we're better off doing trying to figure out some way to do a pseudo end-to-end test thing. It's a CLI. There aren't like functions that you call into it and stuff. So it does make things a little bit tricky. But the way that I make it work is, no, actually, probably not this one. If we go into a specific script, and let's do the validate script here. So this one I am using just in case, and what it ends up looking like is I can say, hey, here's each individual test case, and then I have, yeah, my gosh, this is so bad. This one's actually probably worse than the rest of them. Let me double check. It's been a while since I've been around here. Here's a better, easier one to understand. So yeah, these are just like, what's nice about this is I can say, here is the like basic setup for all of the tests, and here are the things that are different. So like, here's the default with the default setup. So you had to learn the setup to do any of these tests, but like, that's pretty normal, you know. So this is the setup is shared. But then I can say, hey, if I do this differently, so if I provide these arguments, then it operates a little differently. If I do this differently, then that's going to operate. And all of these are using snapshots for what the output of the command would be. So like KCD scripts just forwards on arguments to other CLIs for the most part. Jest actually uses the API, but for like ESLint and Babel and everything, it's all just forwarding CLI arguments on. And so then we can take a look at the snapshots to see. So here, if it calls ESLint with the default args, and this is what those default arguments are going to be. And so yeah, it's interesting. We were just talking about snapshots. This is one area, especially like CLI help output and stuff like that. I use snapshots for that sort of thing all the time, and I think it's useful. And I mentioned that in my effective snapshot testing. So yeah, this, I feel pretty okay with this being a good use case for just in case. It is a little bit complicated in here. If I were to rewrite it, I'm not sure whether I would stick with this solution or not. Yeah, part of me feels like it's pretty good, and the other part of me feels pretty like it's not pretty good. So
okay, yeah, I think I'm getting the gist of it. So yeah, that is kind of what I was thinking. Just in case was like this, repetitive predicate testing, but yeah, I think my issue was where I saw it being used was like things that could actually be broken out into individual unit tests that made more sense, in the sense of like, okay, if I go to this route, things are rendering, and I could test that those things are rendering. And I go to this next route, things are rendering, I could test those things are rendering, instead of like just testing that the route, is happening.
Yeah. So I don't see a whole lot of value in just you're basically testing the router.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
like I don't have an issue with just in case in particular there. You're just making it easier for you to test the router, which I don't think is super valuable.
Okay.
Now there is something to be said for testing my configuration of the router and making sure that I have, this route should render, or this component should render at this route and stuff. That's not exactly testing the router, but it sort of is. You're saying my code does what it does. Yeah, what I would suggest instead is there are probably things on those screens that you want to assert or test or interact with or something.
Exactly.
And so your test should just render the screen to that route and do its other stuff. And you'll cover the fact that you've configured things properly with that. Now there may not be like some of the pages may be like your terms of service. So you're not going to interact with anything there. You just want to assert that your terms of service shows up. And for that, I don't think you need something like just in case. You just have like a little block that says render this page and make sure the route is there. Unless you have tons and tons of those, I don't see a lot of value in abstracting that setup. Yeah. But okay. I don't want you to leave this thinking that there's not a really great use case for just in case. So I want to show you two situations where I did not use just in case because it didn't exist yet. But at the time, I wish that just in case did exist because I kind of had to build it myself. So match sorter is actually, I'm actively maintaining this one pretty much. And it turns out we have a broken build. Why is that? I'll have to look at that. Why that's broken? That should not be. Oh no, I fixed it. It's green now. Yeah. So here is match sorter is basically a pure function. You pass it some arguments. It gives you back a return value. That's a perfect use case for just in case. And so before we had just in case, I made my own thing where I'd say, okay, here's an object. The key is the title of the test, and the value we have the input and we have the output. And then in some cases, we also have only and skip. So I can say I'm focusing on this test, or I want to skip this test for now. All the way at the bottom here, we just have a pretty simple thing that takes that object and iterates through it to create our test cases with Jest. This is like very, very simple form of what just in case does. And it works great. I'm really happy with this test case because it makes it really easy for people to come in and say, oh yeah, I need to add a test case for a case insensitive Cyrillic match. And so then they just say, here's my input, here's what the output should be. So it just makes it really straightforward to add and modify the existing tests because there's not all the extra setup around it. Now, especially for pure functions, the setup itself is there's not much to it. But sometimes there can be a little bit to it. And so that reducing that repetition is quite nice.
I think you just kind of nailed the just hit the nail on the head here. Is I was wondering like what was really bugging me. And I'm starting to think it wasn't just in case. So yeah. I'm thinking it was the implementation and what was being tested. Because like it just comes back around to their.
It was just an improper use of just in case.
And I think that was just what was like irking me so bad, and I couldn't put a finger on it, and I was like, it's like yelling at Braden. I'm like, why is this being used this way?
Well, don't yell at people, jeez. Yeah. It's just a tech decision.
It's friendly. Well, Braden didn't do it. I was just venting with him. So like I think that was probably what was the issue.
Cool.
This looks like a really cool, actually, like this right here looks really cool. And now I'm kind of seeing the use cases as well for just.
Yeah, there are other places that you could use it. Yeah. I have two other things I want to mention about this, and then we can move on. So this is another situation where I needed something like just in case, but it didn't exist yet. And that's RTL CSS JS. So if you use CSS and JS, you're taking these objects and you're turning it into CSS. But if you support right to left languages, then you need to convert padding right to padding left and stuff like that. And so like there are lots of tools for doing this automatically with CSS. And when I was starting to use Aphrodite, this is back in the olden days of the early days of CSS and JS. There was nothing for RTL with CSS and JS. And so I built this, and it's just like the simplest pure function where you say padding left should be padding right, and direction LTR should be direction RTL. Like that's the input and the output. And so with this one, I made it even like more terse than what we have here, because I didn't need to title these things. Like there's no title that doesn't just say what the code is. So I shortened it even further, and this one is just an array of arrays. And so here, the first element of the array is the input, and then the second one is the output. And you just go like that. And this actually makes it super easy to add new test cases. You're just like, oh yeah, we made some mistake with our transform. Let's just add another line right here. It should, when I give it this, it should give me that. It just makes it so easy. And then I had a couple of things where also unchanged. So if I give it nothing, it should give me nothing back. If I give it text to line center, it should give me text line center back. And so like there's a lot of stuff that you can do with this. And I think it's actually pretty cool and really just for pure functions. I haven't with KCD scripts, those are not pure functions, and it just get a little bit gnarly. And like I said earlier, I'm not sure that's a super great use case for just in case, but it works. And it saved me from shipping bugs, so that's good. The last thing that I wanted to mention that probably some people are like chatting in the comments somewhere right now or something is Jest actually has just in case built in, sort of. They went with a totally different API, and I don't like it. And that's why I use just in case, but I want to show it anyway, because some people like it. So let's see, test.every or each, I think is probably what we're looking for. Test each. There you go. So what they do is you can pass this array of elements. It's confusing to me. And then you have this, you could do like this little table thing.
Oh yeah, I've seen this before, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try to use this. It's super cool, and like the output Jest gives you is kind of cool. But then I couldn't figure it out. Things kept breaking, and I started getting frustrated. And I was just like even following examples that other people had made, like for whatever reason wasn't working in my tests, and I was just like, I don't understand.
Yeah, totally. So I decided I prefer just in case. but I mean, this one's not too bad. And the nice thing about these sorts of things is you can actually generate them. So you can make your own little API and then convert that into what they accept. And I do that with just in case all the time. In fact, I even show you how to do that on testingjavascript.com because it can be quite useful. So anyway, there's that. Any other questions from the Zoom?
I can.
Hey, Peter.
So what was the story behind stopping using Google products?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you may have noticed I'm using DuckDuckGo and I'm using Brave now and everything. So first of all, main question that I get from people when I say I switched to Brave is like, well, what about DevTools and stuff? The DevTools are exactly the same. So yeah, what about DevTools? What about them? So they're exactly the same. There's no problem with the DevTools. I can even install all like Chrome extensions and everything. I've got it all. So that side of things doesn't matter. I also have profiles, so I can have my like business Google signed in and whatever, all that stuff. So basically Brave is just like Chrome, except it has automatic tracking disabling and a much nicer new tab screen. Oh, look at that. That's beautiful. I actually, this picture came up last night and my wife was watching. She's like, oh man, I'd like to paint that. It's like so nice looking. So yeah, and then go ahead, Jacob.
So what was that about not using Brave again?
I am using Brave. Brave is great.
Right. Oh, Brave's great. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm just having a flashback to when we had a conversation when Epic React was released, and I was like, hey, you should look at using Brave, and you were like, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. So I've tried switching to Brave a couple of times, and the biggest thing for me was I think earlier on the DevTools were not the same, and you could not install Chrome extensions, and they didn't have profiles. Those three things.
They didn't have profiles.
I can't do
that
it.
Was irking
but now
me.
that all of those things are solved, and they have a really nice import of all your history and everything too. And so like, you know, if I'm looking for match sorter, like I've got all of the history that I had before. So it's really nice. I love it. And I don't get tracked. And I switched to DuckDuckGo. It's surprisingly, like Google's actually really good at search apparently, because DuckDuckGo is not quite as good as Google. But like most of the time I'm looking for stuff that that I like any search engine could find it for me. You know, it may not like, what the heck is this? But like it'll find it eventually. And if I'm not happy with it, then I just do a bang G and it'll send me over to Google. But yeah, I just like not being tracked online. I think that's great. And I was using uBlock, Origin, and whatever, but just having it in Brave is better. So yeah, there's that. And just in general, like distancing myself from Google stuff. It's mostly privacy stuff. So I don't use Google Photos. I got a Synology NAS that's in my office, and it's all backed up, you know, encrypted onto Backblaze, and it's great. And actually, if people want to know the stuff that I'm using, I've got it on my uses page. Yeah, Synology. So here's my home stuff. Yeah, so I don't know. It's just kind of felt like I want to have my stuff. I want to own it, and have more control over that. And then actually, Peter, since you're the one who asked the question, hopefully that was a sufficient answer. I am still using like Gmail and Google Calendar and stuff as well. But
what about YouTube ads?
Yeah. So the YouTube stuff, YouTube ads. So I've got my transparency page. And I've been slowly removing things from my sources of income, just like things that I didn't feel I needed, and weren't pushing my mission forward. So my mission as just a person, a professional, is to help make the world a better place through quality software. And so the things that I make money doing, pretty much, you know, assuming that I'm financially independent and I'm not like desperately needing every source of income, which that's the position that I'm in, I can be a little bit more choosy about where I'm making my money. And what I feel like where you make your money is where lots of the motivation comes from for a business. And when you start making money doing things that don't align with your mission, then you start doing things that don't align with your mission as well. And so I had YouTube monetized, and so I had Google AdSense on this list, and I removed it recently because monetizing my YouTube videos doesn't help me make the world a better place, and it's such a small amount of money relative to the other like forms of income that it doesn't help me enough to justify its existence and forcing people to watch ads, unless they're using Brave, in which case they don't they don't have to. Yeah, so I just decided I'm not making enough for this to be like part of my sustainable business model for me to push my mission forward. So I'm just going to turn it off. And then I also had GitHub sponsors on here for a while. Yeah, lots of really awesome people who were sponsoring me. And I decided, you know what, I don't need the GitHub sponsors. So I only turned GitHub sponsors on because people were asking me to. They said, hey, I want to support you. I want to, just give you like buy you a coffee once a month, sort of thing. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. That's nice of you. But I realized that I don't need that. And maybe the people who are supporting me felt like they needed that. But I would rather that they use that money to buy somebody else a coffee who needs a coffee. I don't even drink coffee. So, yeah, so that was kind of that. And if people really want to support me, then they can buy one of my courses. I know my courses are expensive, so if you can't afford it, then join the Discord and help other people. You don't have to support me with money, and I'm doing just fine. So support other people. That was kind of the motivation there. Everything else that's on here aligns well with my mission and allows me to keep a sustainable business. The Amazon Associates thing. So all of my websites have the Amazon Associates thing on there. And I figured with that one, so with the YouTube ads, I'm reducing people's experience of watching my videos by forcing them to watch ads. With the Amazon Associates, it doesn't make any difference whether my tag is in the URL or not for them. They're going to buy it or they're not, and it doesn't make a difference. And so I'm fine making a couple bucks on when people like buy soap or whatever. So that's why that one's going to stay. But I did think about taking it off, but because it's not a ton of money, but it would be more work to take it off than to just leave it on. So I'll just leave it on. So. Yeah, great question. I am not afraid to talk about this sort of thing. I think transparency is a great thing. That's why I added this page. And if you own a company, then I encourage you to make a transparency page too, because I think it just really helps people understand whether they want to give you their money. And if you're worried that having transparency will make people not want to give you money, then maybe you should like do something else. So, make the world a better place. So anyway, other questions here on the Zoom?
Yeah, I had a question.
Hey there, Harsh.
It's sort of strange. I was wondering if I could share my screen, or is that
go for it? Yeah, let me stop my share.
Cool. Yeah, it's a weird TypeScript question. So I have this kind of basic. It's basically an API wrapper around an API that that exists, right? And it's fine, except when I do npm run build, it works. Like I get a build, right?
Okay.
But when I do tsc dot, I get like these funky errors, and I don't understand why there's a difference between this and npm run build, basically.
I feel like I've seen this before.
And all I'm doing in npm run is just doing tsc. So
I think that what's happening is that it's including your node modules, because you see those errors are coming from node modules. And so I don't understand why, but I think that's what's going on. And I don't know why it's, yeah, I don't know why. Anybody else? I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that I feel like I've seen this before, so I think it's a relatively common problem. And if you go to the TypeScript Discord, I'm sure that you could get an answer pretty quick.
Gotcha. Yeah, I figured I'd just ask in case, there's some TypeScript, hopefully some TypeScript gurus here. So I figured but yeah, thanks. If anyone, finds a reason, like, let me know. Otherwise I'm gonna stop my share.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm sure you'll find something pretty quick asking on the either our Discord or the TypeScript one. They've actually got a really cool bot for getting help. It's a very interesting system over there on the TypeScript Discord. I've thought about doing the same thing here, but cool. Any other questions in Zoom?
Yeah. Hey, hi, Ken. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good
Hi.
evening. So actually, Ken, in our organization, we started with a very small application where we were just using in-state component states. Like, for example, if there are 4 components, they were using their own states, like from use state and everything. But later on, we thought that our application was growing along, and we started using Redux. So one question that everybody's mind that came into everybody's mind was when to use a state inside the component and when to put states inside a Redux. So there is one rule that I have probably seen ki, if a state is needed by many of the components which are like nested in many hierarchies, then you should probably use that in a Redux state. But still, there are many blog posts all over the internet where they say you should maintain your state all in Redux. So this is just a kind of a confusion that our whole company is getting into, and we are trying to figure out one golden rule. Like, is there any golden rule or any suggestions around that?
Yeah. I've got a golden rule for you, and even a flow chart that you can look at. And I just put 2 blog posts in here about co-location that you can take a look at. Yeah, state co-location will make your app faster. Has a flow chart in there. Here, I'll share my screen again. Sorry, I just noticed a chat here in Zoom. Okay, cool. Annie, I just want to let you know, I do see your chat in here. We'll make sure we get your question covered here. Okay, yeah, so I did not create this flow chart, by the way. This is by Steven, who's a member of our Discord community. He's amazing. So the basic idea is keep state as close to where it's relevant as possible. Ignore all of the blog posts that say all your state should go in Redux. That's bad advice. Don't do that. Every application Redux app that I've actually worked in myself, we went that route for a long time, and it was awful. So it was just very difficult to make a change to existing state. You're worried about breaking other things. Who knows if you're going to break it? And then at the time, we didn't have Redux Toolkit. Now with Redux Toolkit, things are a little bit better, but like it ended up being bad for performance as well. Yeah, that's another thing. If you're using Redux, you should absolutely be using Redux Toolkit because it comes with all of the middlewares and everything that you should probably be using for optimized performance and stuff. But yeah, this is what I would suggest. Give those blog posts a look.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you.
Absolutely. Cool. Who's next?
Hello.
Yes, hello.
I've been meaning to ask about like kinseydots.com. Like whenever I'm out, I love reading your blogs, and sometimes I don't have access to internet. So I'm meaning to ask you, like, will there be any like PWA support for kinseydots.com?
Yeah. You know what? I used to have the offline Gatsby plugin for my website, but it ended up being an enormous pain to tell people when it was updated. Like I'd have this little thing that popped down and said, hey, there's an update. But literally every time I deployed the site, there would be an update. And for a lot of people, they only come to my site once every week or something. And I redeploy a couple of times a week. And so there would be a banner pretty much every time you'd come to my site. There was like, oh, it's time to update. That was super annoying for a lot of people. I got a lot of complaints about that and I hated it. And so I just said, you know what, just turn that off. Oh, and like that sort of thing is difficult to get right. And I got it wrong a couple of times. And so that's why that was disabled. Now I am actually in the process of totally rewriting my entire site with Remix. And with that, I might turn that back on. We'll see.
Yeah, that will be great.
Yeah. It's an interesting idea, and I'll have a lot more control over things, and I'll be more interested and engaged. Gatsby is, for me, Gatsby is like touch it as little as possible because I don't want to break anything. With Remix, it'll be a lot more fun to play with, and so I'll have little experiments like that and stuff.
Okay.
Should be interested to see how Remix handles that as well.
Yeah, it'll be different for sure.
Thank you.
What's the big deal about Remix? I mean, I've seen people move from Gatsby to Next, and now I'm starting to hear Remix.
Okay, well, all right. So I'm still in the process of learning enough and understanding enough about Remix to articulate my feelings about it. But when Ryan first gave me a demo before Remix was announced or anything, I was blown away by what is possible. And one of the things that I love, especially about Remix, is the embracing of progressive enhancement that and just the platform in general. So most frameworks are writing a lot of JavaScript to do things that the browsers do already, that they've been doing for years. And those frameworks are capable of doing what Remix is doing, but they don't encourage that. They instead encourage you to use their own cache or their own, like all these other things. But Remix is like, no, we're going to embrace the platform. You're going to be using, the fetch API with actual responses and requests and everything so that it's actually like using the web platform. We're going to rely heavily on cache headers and different things like that for optimized performance. And just the nested routing is another big one that like nobody else really has, but you've got nested routing here. And so just the way that they associate your routes with the files on the file system. Of course, like there's an imperative API for declaring routes and stuff, but most people are going to just use the file system. Yeah, there are a lot of things that kind of distinguish it pretty well, and it's still early days. It's pre-release. Anybody who's bought a license to it is getting a developer preview. And that's actually another thing that I really like about it, is that it is paid software rather than open source software, which sounds weird because we're all like open source is the best, but the problem with open source and especially like sponsored open source where it's a company that is sponsoring this is everybody who uses it actually adds burden to the maintenance of the project, right? You're reporting issues and needing support and all of that. And so this is just like sucking dry the will of the maintainers, which is just a big challenge. And we're always talking about open source sustainability and stuff.
So Kent, quick follow up on that. So with some of these other, say, frameworks and stuff, we have a lot of reliance on, say, like React and whatnot, like Next.js, Gatsby. People like to call it static site generator or whatever. I know there's more to it than I know, but another thing about Remix is it's not dependent on something like React or Vue or whatnot, is it?
It's kind of like Vite, I guess, where Vite, I don't know if that's how you say that, but it's this new thing that Evan Yu is working on, where it's like primarily targeted for developers of a specific framework, but works with other frameworks. That's sort of Remix as well. Anyway, I was talking about how Remix is paid. So with other frameworks, they're sponsored by a company and they don't make money. Like the more people who use it does not necessarily mean that they're making more money and getting more support on the framework itself. The framework is a indirect mechanism for them making money. So like Gatsby, they have Gatsby Cloud. And so they hope that if you use Gatsby, you'll also want to use Gatsby Cloud, and that's how they make their money. With Next.js, they hope that you want to use Vercel along with Next.js. If you don't, then they don't make any money off of you and you're just sucking value off of them. With Remix though, if you're using Remix, you're directly paying for the support and for the longevity of the framework itself. So that's you are using what they're selling. And this kind of goes along with the transparency thing. Sustainability is where is really critical for any business, and that's where motivation comes from. How do we make this business sustainable? And so by aligning the people who are using your stuff with the way that you're a sustainable company, you can end up with a much better product for the thing that people are using. So that's another thing that I really like about Remix. Eventually, they do plan on doing some sort of free tier or something like that to make it so people can try it out and play around with it, maybe in open source or something. Right now, they're just trying to release it, and so they don't have anything like that. But I'm pretty confident that they're going to have some sort of free thing in the future. Yeah, there are a lot of things about that. I haven't written any blog posts about it or anything because I want to wait until I actually release something with Remix before I start saying, here's why I recommend people look into into Remix. So that's
quick question around that Remix. So you mentioned like Next and Vercel and Gatsby and their cloud. So like I know that there's like Blitz.js as well as Redwood.js. These are both also alternative frameworks. They don't really have that other income situation. I guess if I were to say Redwood had an income situation, would be their massive investor would be the best.
That's how it always starts. Yeah. So I mean, it always starts with like, we're going to just get a ton of users and then we'll figure out how to monetize it. That's how Gatsby started as well. And then with some frameworks like Next, it was, we're a company, we're building React apps, and oh, wow, look at this cool abstraction. If we make this work really well with our infrastructure, then maybe we can get some people using this and wanting to use our infrastructure. And this is not like a bad thing. I just want to be clear. I think Next is great. And I think Vercel is awesome. I love Guillermo. But that's just kind of the way that it is. So yeah, and with Blitz.js and lots of things, it's just open source, and it's just a thing that somebody has decided they want to work on, and it's awesome. I know the guy who created Blitz.js too, and he's great. I remember the first time I met him at a React conference, and it was fun chatting with him. So yeah, it's sometimes it's just like an open source thing, but at the end of the day, the more users that you get, yeah, you'll get like contributors and stuff, but lots of people are just asking for support. And so it's very difficult to make this sustainable. You can do ads and you can do like these different things. Tanner Lindsley is trying some interesting things with sponsors and stuff. But I just really love the Remix model of, you can have this software if you pay for it. And if you pay for it, then the software can get better because we're making money on you using the software. So it's so funny to me that like in our world, we make a product and we don't expect that, like it's weird if people ask to be paid for the product. It's normally like, we've just gotten so used to, I don't pay for the software, I pay for the infrastructure that goes around the software or something. But I don't think that has to be that way. And I'm excited about what Remix has to offer in that realm.
Speaking of Tanner, I listened to a Syntax FM episode where your name got dropped like every 10 minutes.
He was nice. Yeah, that was a fun episode. Okay, cool. So let's move on. It's already 10:14 and I've got like tons of questions. I'm gonna actually stop really quick because I know Annie is on the call and she just can't speak or something. There's something wrong with her mic. And she was asking something earlier about this. So wanted to test Cypress dark mode. And so let me pull that up. I probably should have pulled this down earlier. So I'm going to pull this down while we're talking about it. Okay, and Annie also mentioned as a follow-up that she'd solved her problem, but it doesn't totally understand how it was solved. So I mentioned to Annie that I've never done anything like this, and I was just going to experiment and play around with it during office hours. So this may be a bit of a train wreck, but it helps that the solution is right there. So we'll see if I can understand what the solution is and then explain it. So first off, it's probably a good idea to understand the problem. We're trying to test dark mode. So the desired behavior is easily detected dark mode and light mode. And the dark mode can be loaded using the query string or going to change the appearance. And I've got it downloaded. Let me let me install dependencies here really quick as well. And so since we want to test when the user switches dark mode, we want to mimic the this in the browser. Dark mode test spec should load dark mode style. Okay. So the first thing that, and so I'm going to guess that there's no way in Cypress to say, hey, pretend that the system preferences appearance is dark. Like there's probably no way to reasonably do that and have it run on CI and work. And so we've got to mimic it, as Annie is saying here, as just to mimic that somehow. And so the first test that she tried was on before unload, just stubbing out match media and saying it should return match is true, so that it when they do the check prefers dark scheme dark, that it is that's what they prefer. And that's actually what I would try for first too. So that seems to make sense. It looks like it's still loading the light mode, but looks like we have a solution. So when we change the Cypress code in both light mode and dark mode into something like this, so I'm trying to see the difference between these two. Oh, okay. So returns matches false at event listener. So now that's interesting. Actually, I didn't realize that match media, when called with these args, returns an object that has add event listener. So let me look at this really quick. Oh, right. Yeah. Hold on.
I have to add that this is super cool.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Anybody wants to test dark mode, they can use this as a reference. I'll even give it a star. So there you go. Get a little visibility. Yeah, okay. Hold on a second. Let me go to my remix. Can't see the odds. This is my current. Don't look at this as a judge of what remix can do. I'm just playing with stuff right now. But yeah, so I have dark mode implemented in this, and I just want to look at, is it in here? Yeah, I guess that is the API. So the reason that that this works and this does not is because, well, I guess I don't know what your code looked like before, but you do need to add an event listener. To be notified of when it changes. I guess I'm not sure. In the provider, we have something like this. So Annie, I think your question was, well, so with this implementation, then I can tell you that the reason that it didn't work before is because you didn't have add event listener. And when you call add event listener on the results of match media, that's going to blow up because you're stubbing it to not return the add event listener. So that's going to blow up because that is calling undefined. So undefined is not a function. But my guess is the reason that that you were confused is because initially you did not add event listener and you just said match media and matches is true. And you're wondering why that didn't work. That's my guess, Annie. And actually, if you can just, you're chatting here in Zoom. I typically prefer chatting in Discord so everybody can see it. But you're welcome to just tell me if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, the chat says that the event listener solves the problem, but I don't quite get why. Is what she's saying.
Yeah. So the reason is because if your implementation was like this, then the reason is that it's because add event listener wasn't a function. Now this is interesting. I just noticed this try catch stuff. So I didn't actually spend time to look at the implementation here. So the first thing that you do is if you match, then we automatically set dark mode to true. You could actually do this within your use state call. So you'd say use state for your dark mode and make it a function that returns whether or not matches dark mode. That way you don't have to have a re-render after, because then you'll get a flash of light mode and then it'll re-render as dark mode, which you don't want to do. So you can actually, maybe this will be, I don't know if this will be useful, but you can take a look at this. Let me just grab the URL there. So yeah, that's what I do is I check, and actually I also store it in local storage as well, so they can toggle between the two, so they can control that for our site specifically. Yeah, and then I have this layout effect actually. This is use SSR layout effect. This is cheating. The React docs tell you not to do this, but I don't care. I do it anyway. Like this is a better solution than what they're saying. So yeah, so here I say if we're if in on the server side, then I don't need to run this at all. And so we just return a function that does nothing. Otherwise it's use layout effect. So if this is rehydrating on the client, then we just use layout effect. Yeah, so in a layout effect, and this is important because I want to render, but I don't want the browser to update based on my render until after I have a chance to make a change. And the way that I do this actually is through CSS variables. So I can update all the CSS variables before the browser paints. And then when the browser paints, it has all the right CSS variables in place for my dark mode, light mode switch there. But then I also have another effect here, and this is what schedules the event handlers and stuff for this prefer dark query. Yeah, and here I would need to have the mock include add event listener for a change on there as well. So I'm not sure why the try catch is here. Yeah, that's unexpected. I don't know why you would need that. I think that you could probably wholesale swap your implementation for what I have here, and you'd be better off. The only difference here is I'm using CSS variables, and it looks like you're just using state, which is fine. But if you want to understand why I use CSS variables, I've actually written a blog post about this, and I will share that presently. So yeah. Hopefully that's sort of helpful, Annie. I don't know if it totally answers your question, but I'm glad you found a solution that works in any case.
Ken, while on the topic of Cypress, is there a way to kind of see what kind of coverage you have between Cypress and Jest, kind of combine them?
Oh, you mean like getting coverage from your Cypress test and then combining it with your coverage from your unit and integration?
Yeah, just to see, like between the two, do I have good coverage?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So first I'll preface this by saying I don't care about end-to-end test coverage metrics. I know a lot of people really do, but I do not. I'm even with like regular coverage, I'm more interested in use case coverage than I am in code coverage. That metric
I have read your blogs on that.
Okay,
so
cool.
In fact, I'm coming from the unit test side. I don't care about the end-to-end coverage, but if I kind of say this is very hard to do in unit tests, and I'm going to do it using end-to-end, can I sort of take that in and combine and say, okay, peace of mind, yes, I have covered everything.
I would say that's also useful because some of us have to answer to managers, Ken.
Yeah. And that's where this always comes from. It's the managers like, we need 100% code coverage, and they have no idea what they're talking about, but they just heard that in some talk by some overly paid consultant, and now they have to do this. Yeah, so I know that it's possible to get code coverage for end-to-end. As far as combining the reports, I actually talked to CodeCove years ago, codecove.io, and I asked them if it was possible to combine reports, and they do have a mechanism for combining reports. But the problem is, and I don't know if they've overcome this particular problem or not, but the problem is that mapping the code coverage you get from end to end to the source files, I think is difficult. I haven't spent any time trying to figure out end-to-end code coverage, to be clear. I just don't care, but I know some people have. Yeah, so the problem is that when you're doing end-to-end tests, you have your whole application built, right? And it's all like been minified and all of that stuff. There are source maps and stuff, and I know they deal with that, but it's all been like compiled together. And so then you're running code coverage on this, and this is going to include your dependencies and all of that stuff, which is not the case for your end-to-end or for your unit and integration tests. So I don't know whether it's possible to combine those reports. but it like it probably is. Let me think. There's a in testing JavaScript, I show you a code coverage report, and I kind of show you how that code coverage report is built. Let me see if I can find that. It is testing JavaScript here. I think it was in maybe that one. Yeah, maybe it was static testing tools, possibly. No, definitely not that one. Let me see if I can find this. I don't know if I can. Cannot remember. But if you get testingjavascript.com, then there's a video where I show you how. Oh, you know what? I think I have a link in it in the video. So let me log in really quick. And then I can just find that link.
My 2 cents on this too, while you're looking for that, is if you're using something like CodeCov or SonarQube or anything like that, you could also see if they have like tooling for getting code coverage from your end-to-end framework, as well as your your test runner framework like Jest. And they might have something that could do that as well, like plugins and transformers and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's possible this is a solved problem. But yeah, so here's what a covered file looks like to gather this code coverage. So we actually transform the file itself and add a bunch of stuff to make it so that we can add coverage for it. So here's like the source file, but then when it's transformed to add code coverage instrumentation, it turns into this giant monstrosity. And so you can sort of squint and see the same implementation here, but like there are all of these like pluses everywhere and whatnot, so that we can measure the code coverage. So when you're all done running the tests, what it will do is it grabs this global variable coverage. So this is the global coverage variable. And that has like all of the coverage data, all of this coverage data for every single file that you're collecting coverage from. And then you take that to generate the report. So the reason I'm bringing all this up is if your end-to-end coverage tool does the same thing or something similar, and you can get that, and then you can get the same thing from your test, you can merge it yourself. I'm guessing this is a solved problem. I'm sure you're not the first person to have this problem. So there may be tools out there that that solve this, but anyway, hopefully that was sort of interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. So it is 10:28. I'm sure I've got lots of questions still. So I'm gonna scroll through this. Feel free to interrupt me if you're in Zoom and you have a question, but I'm just gonna move on through here. Actually, let me just double check. Oh yeah. Okay. So Evelyn is wondering about this here. Answering your question now. Okay. So in Epic React, we have a tic-tac-toe exercise. And here we make this a copy of the squares array. You know what? It might even be better if I can come to the React hooks workshop, and we'll get this up and running. So we can observe the issues if you don't do this properly. So this is exercise 5, I think. No, I think it's 4. And we'll just do the solution actually. So here it is. When you select a square, this is tic-tac-toe, so you're choosing a square, then it's going to make a copy of the squares array. So this squares array is just a bunch of X's and O's. It's 9 long for the 9 squares that you've got. And when this finally finishes compiling, we can actually look at it. Finished. Okay, good. So we're on final version. Here we go. So yeah, here you've got this and whatnot. Now we've got a winner. Okay, so what happens if you don't make the copy? Well, let's just try it without making a copy at all. No copy. We just made squares copy B of the squares. So now we're going to click here, and nothing happens. So why is nothing happening? Well, let's look at the dev tools. So if we come over to the profiler, and we start a profiling session, and then I click here, and then I stop a profiling session, it says no data was recorded. So like nothing was re-rendered. If I click it again and hit restart and click around, do all this stuff, we're going to notice we get one re-render for the board when I hit restart. And the reason that happened is because I said, hey, squares, you are now a new array that is empty. And so while these two lines of code may be the same thing, they actually create a new array. And that's the difference between what we're doing right here and what we're doing right here. Is here we're saying, let's take the squares and we'll change it. And then we'll say, hey, squares state, here's a squares array for you to update with. And but then it actually, sorry, my eyes just got really dry for a second. Then React says, okay, cool. You want me to re-render? Let me see this new state. Oh, this new state looks really familiar. It's actually exactly the same as the old state that I had. I guess I don't need to re-render. And that's what's going on, is because we're saying, hey, here we've got our original squares array. We're just going to make a change to it. React doesn't care if you make changes. It ignores that entirely, and it just says, is this array the same one as before? I don't care about the contents. I just care about the identity, the spot in memory. I'm pointing to this array, and it's saying, oh, these are the exact same thing, so I will not re-render. Whereas when we click restart here, we're creating a brand new array. They may both be empty, but it doesn't matter. It's a brand new array, so I'm going to re-render. And so that's why you need to make a copy, is because you need to say, hey, I'm going to take that original array. I'm going to make a copy of it. And we'll have two arrays that are exactly the same. And then I'll just forget about this one, and we'll modify this one. And then we'll say, hey, React, I got a new array for you, and it'll re-render. So that's why. That is not, or that's why you have to make a copy. And just in general, because of that reason, but for other reasons as well, it's better to avoid manipulating stuff that you're passing around to other things. Creating a variable that's mutable within a single function is like, that's, who cares? That's fine. But when I try to avoid mutation across boundaries, and this is a boundary right here between me and React. So I don't want to mutate something that is going from my code to somebody else's code. I want to try and keep all mutation within my own code. And that includes like passing between one function to another. If I'm going to mutate, I will typically make a copy first. And the reason for that is if you don't, then it can be difficult to know, like, oh, I observed that there is a change here, but I'm not sure what that change is. And so there are reasons to do mutation. And often it comes down to performance, like making a copy is going to be really computationally expensive or something. And typically in those scenarios, that's not very common, but when you run into those scenarios, it ends up being really complicated. But if you're getting a huge performance benefit, then that's why, like, that's the cost you pay for performance improvements. And I'm thinking specifically about React Query, because they do a lot of really complicated stuff to update things in place rather than by mutating, rather than making copies of everything, because there's just, lots of data in there. It's computationally expensive. Okay, and Yago just asked. Yeah, I just noticed that.
To note, there's one thing more that I didn't write there. When you're copying like this, the squares copy, I mean, if it's like a nested object, so you're still going to be mutating the original one, right? Because the spread only does like a shallow copy.
Yeah, that's right. So and that's where like things like immer come in really handy, because mutation is easier than like copy, especially when we're doing deep stuff. Like now you have to copy all the way down. This deep nested thing is super annoying, and that's why immer exists, is so that you can make a copy of something, but then like your interaction with that is mutation. It's pretty fascinating what they've done, and it makes it a lot easier. But yeah, anybody who's used Redux in the past couple of years has that terrible experience of having to like spread this and then spread this and then spread that. Like, it's such a disaster. I hate it. And that's why immer is a thing. So cool. Okay, so we are over time, but I know that there are lots of questions, so I'm going to try and get through the last couple of things.
The other one's the array thing. Just one second. The array 9 fill null. Wouldn't be like a best practice to move that outside, because if you restart, even though you're restarting to the same thing, you're gonna be creating like re-rendering again every time you restart, right?
Yeah, so we could do this and this would work. Keep in mind that anytime you extract something outside of the component, every single instance of that component will share that value. Now it's fine if you don't mutate it, then you'll be fine. Who cares? But if you do end up mutating it, then it could cause some really weird bugs. So yeah, this would work out fine. And actually, this comes with a tiny bit performance benefit of not re-rendering when I just click restart. So if I say, hey, restart, it is not going to re-render because it's like, well, I was already restarted. Like I have the exact same array. That is negligible, but it is there. And then also creating a new array every time I restart, that is also totally, it's like, who cares? I'll do this const my thing, whatever. Like it's whatever. It's so fast that it would never be a problem. So, but yeah, that is a thing that you could do.
There's also the initial function for set the React state. Where you have like the initial function, and then you just call anonymous function, call that, and then that's on the initial render and never re-renders. We could do that if we were worried about things. But what's interesting about this is the reason that you would go with the array or the function here is because you're saying, well, I don't want to create a new array needlessly on every re-render. But what you're doing is you're actually creating a function needlessly on every render anyway. So like it's like probably the array is less expensive if you're really measuring that. And if this is your bottleneck, then you may need to step outside of React, because like there's so many other things that are going to be worse than this. So it's unlikely that this will be a problem.
Was more about the reset, like not rendering every time you reset when I brought that up.
Yeah. And there's that. If it was expensive to render, then avoiding that re-render could be useful, but try to first fix the expensive render first. Okay, cool. Let me see if I can answer these last few things, because I know it's like a whole week before we can do this again. So I'd like to try and get some of these things in really quick. Thank you, friends, for answering each other's questions. That's helpful. And we talked about that. Oh yeah. So Virat was asking about React Query. So I did a live stream a few days ago where I fixed a couple of problems that I had in the Bookshelf app with React Query. I actually later went to go fix those in the branches and realized that they were already fixing the branches. And then I went to the videos and I never did it wrong in the first place. So the videos are fine. And maybe I should just delete the video that I put on YouTube, because then people are going to think that I did it wrong. But no, it's right. It's right in the videos. I just, at some point when I was making changes or something, I broke something. But so Virat is wondering how I'd write a regression test for those changes. I'm not going to explain them. You can go look at the video because I just don't have time. But how would I write a regression test for those? That specific change, so we had stuff that wasn't getting into the cache and properly. What you could do is
you would introduce TypeScript, right? Because the problem was that it's
TypeScript would have solved it, because I was using the API wrong, and TypeScript would have solved it. And like from a behavior, that's the right answer. But if I'm not using TypeScript and I wanted to check this, then what you could do to like write a test to make sure that this doesn't happen again is make sure that I don't get additional requests. So my problem was that, oh, bless you, Naresh, you're still unmuted. I'll mute you so you can sneeze in peace. The problem was that when my components rendered, the book wasn't in the cache. And so therefore I had to go get it from the back end. But the objective was to say, hey, we already hit the back end with this Bootstrap API to get all of my data, so I don't have to make this request. And so all that you could do is you'd say, I render the app, and I only make one request to get data, and that would have caught that problem. So yeah, there's your answer. Okay, so I haven't read this one yet. Let me just read it really quick. I do this every week. I need to spend less time rambling. I ramble a lot, so I just need to stop rambling so much because I'm always like rushing through these last questions. Oh yeah, I did read a little bit of this.
Hey Kent, this is Stian. Just a really quick question. How long do we have access to this content and the office hours and
forever? Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, if anybody needs to drop off, like, you can watch it later. I will not be offended. I'm not. It is followed by all collaborators. I'm not sure I understand what that means. Developers find it easy to implement. That's really relative. It's relative to the experience of the developers and whether this is familiar technology or not. So I don't think that I would say that is necessarily, yeah, familiarity is only one piece of the puzzle. Ease does not create maintainable applications. Simplicity does. Those are two different concepts. And so, yeah. Developers know why they write each test. That's a good one. They should be able to explain why each test exists. Yeah, that's for sure. Every bug should have been caught by the strategy. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so, like, I've worked at companies where the strategy was developers do a couple tests, but then we have QA engineers who are writing the end-to-end tests. I have mixed feelings about this, but one benefit to that approach is they might think of things that you didn't think of. Like, you're the one who wrote the code, so you're thinking of all the edge cases, but like, we always miss edge cases. Like, it's just a thing that happens. I mean, unless you're using a finite state machine, then there shouldn't be edge cases. But yeah, like, we're gonna miss stuff. And so having somebody else write the tests can help think of things, but that somebody else has to be very familiar with the domain and with the feature that you're talking about. So yeah, sometimes you don't have the budget for that kind of person. And typically I feel like engineers should be the ones writing their own tests, but it can help to have somebody outside who knows what the feature is all about, but isn't the one who wrote the code, who can come in and help think of other edge cases you may not have thought of. Yeah. No test should break if we refactor. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Now, you'll never be able to get that 100% of the time. We're always walking back and forth on this line of trade-offs that we're making, you know, when we're talking unit end to end and stuff. But in general, yeah, refactor should not break your tests. And if it does, then it means that your test relied on some part of the implementation. And like I said, you want to avoid that, but you can't always get that 100%. But yeah, that's a good guiding principle. Broken tests are easy to fix. Yep, I think that's a pretty good. What that means to me is the error messages are clear. That's what that should be. So like, and if the error message isn't clear, then you need a better assertion, or at least some code comments that explain what this assertion is intended to do, and put it like right next to the assertion, because then the code frame will show the comment, which is kind of nice. That kind of helps with the error message there. Time spent on tests enables the team to deliver on time. Yeah, and the definition of on time should be, I mean, like, the engineers are the ones who make estimates, right? Hopefully, if you work at a functional company, then the engineers are the ones who make the estimates on how long tasks take. Engineers are always really bad at that. At least I am. I'm bad at estimates. But when you're making the estimate, you should think about the fact that you're going to want to test this because you want to maintain it in the long term. The writing the test does not necessarily make you deliver it faster. In fact, normally that is not the case. But writing the test will make it so that you have fewer bugs, so you don't have to come back to it as much. So having a good test suite will mean you spend less time on this part of the project, assuming that you're maintaining it in the long term. If you're not, then tests just slow you down 100% of the time. But most of us are maintaining things long term. We want to have tests, and having a good suite of tests will mean that you spend less time on the thing over the course of its lifetime. And so, yeah, whether the test enables you to deliver on time, yeah, the on time depends on how you estimate it. Yeah, I would be more focused on the time spent on tests means we have to spend less time on this part of the code base. That's the goal there. Confident for my next delivery thanks to my tests. Yeah, actually, totally. If your next delivery involves the code that you wrote before, and the code that you've tested, then yeah, you should be able to iterate faster on that code because you have tests. Yes, that's absolutely true.
I actually am a huge fan of using Cypress tests as essentially those are your regression tests, as well as like making sure that you're confident about your next delivery, right? That your Cypress tests are going to make you confident because it's testing what your users are seeing, right? You can use it to also test edge cases of like strange user behavior if you find those bugs. And now you have regression tests for bugs as well. And you can just keep that rolling, just keep snowballing that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I should probably amend my original statement that writing tests will make it take longer. That's not always the case. Sometimes you'll, especially like when Jacob, when you brought up Cypress, it made me think Cypress driven development can actually make you a lot faster. So assume that I've built something like this before. So you load the page, you click on this button, it opens a modal, you fill out this form, and then you click submit. And that was the experience that I needed to test, was what happens when I click submit. Hot module replacement can sort of help with this a little bit. You make a change and then you just click submit again or something. But I never trust hot module replacement for stuff like that. I always want to refresh and just try it again. So when I was developing this, Cypress wasn't a thing yet, I think. And certainly I wasn't experienced with it. And so I would just I'd make my change, I'd hit save, and I'd probably change too much because I didn't want to do this whole thing over again. But then I had to hit reload. I had to hit this, I do this. Eventually I actually added a little script that I would copy and paste in the console that would automate this for me so that it would do all of those things. But that's what Cypress can do for you. You just write a little Cypress test that clicks that, does this, whatever. And every time you make a change, it just runs it again. So you don't have to do that. And so if you're doing some TDD or Cypress driven development, then yeah, the tests actually can help speed up the process of getting it to created in the first place, or finishing whatever task you're working on, but not always. And that's why I kind of waffle on that. So often it takes longer because you're writing more code, but not always.
That is so true when you are having complex forms. There are some forms that have so much validation on them that we take 5 minutes just to fill the form out.
Yeah,
and that's where Cypress is so useful.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree. Okay, cool. Hopefully that was helpful. We're almost there. You know what? I need to. I try. Anything else I can help with? Google thought I was talking to it. Yeah, I'm going to add this feature to the meetups thing so that when you get the notification, it also will post in like a text chat if you've got one or something. Because yeah, Tiger, you're totally legit asking for the Zoom link. It is in the notification, but it's not always obvious. So pre-decided subjects, free live streams. I just answer the questions as they come. I never think about it ahead of time. Brave is awesome. I agree. We're almost there, almost done. This is a great tweet. And Steven, hey there. Are you still here? Yeah, there you are. I just called you Steven, but your name is Steve. So sorry, apologize about that. Let me take a look at what we've got here. I can't hear you, Steve. I see that you're not muted, so must be something wrong with your microphone. So I'll just look at this really quick. We're using Firebase and Firestore. I have experience with these things, but not recent. So we'll see how much I can offer. let's see. Can you maybe, if you can't get your microphone working, oh yeah, trying to switch from using local storage, having issues. Oh, right. So what's going on here is this is asynchrony. So the code that runs in here is going to run at a different time from the code that runs at the root of this module here. And so you're not going to have access to the task list. That's going to be a promise that is pending. And so at this point in time, you're not going to be able to access it. Now with local storage, that's synchronous. And so it like the browser will stop doing everything it's doing and wait for your JavaScript to run. That's what we mean when we're talking about synchronous. And so it has to go into local storage, it pulls out that value, and then it parses it as JSON. If there's a lot of stuff in there, then that actually can not be great for performance. So that's one drawback of using local storage. It's not always bad, but it can be if it's a lot of data or something. So you're going to be in a little bit of a tricky situation switching from local storage to loading everything from Firebase, because you're going to have a loading state. You have to wait for the stuff from Firebase to come back. And I know this is what you were trying to avoid, but it should be very fast for the user. It shouldn't really make a difference, but it does mean that your code needs to handle that loading state and that loading time. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that. You can use whatever, like use effect if you want to, or like React query to load this stuff in and manage that loading state. But yeah, you won't be able to just stick it inside of a React create context. Your React create context will have to be something like just a empty array of tasks. That's probably what you'd need to do, or just undefined. And I've got a blog post about context here that might be helpful to you as well. So hopefully that answers your question, Steve. I do need to move on to the next thing, so I hope that was helpful. Okay, we are almost done. Is it intentional that it's streamed on different YouTube? Oh no, I streamed it to the wrong YouTube channel again. Dang it. No, that is not intentional. Gosh, dang it. This happens all the time. I need to figure out some way to make that just not happen anymore. Because yeah, I've got a brand account and then I've got my personal account. You're watching it on my personal account right now, which is fine. Like you can just look at my videos of me in college doing gymnastics and stuff if you want. But like, yeah, dang it. Yeah, this has happened multiple times. What I'm going to do is I will download it and I'll re-upload it to the regular channel, and I'll delete it from that old one. Bummer. Yes, a great talk. Simplicity is awesome. Okay, what about changing office hours and a half? Yeah, probably should do something like that. That's what it's been like the last 3 weeks. I've always gone over time. Okay, that's everything. So thanks everybody for joining me. Next week we will be here again. And yeah, it's been fun. Been real fun. I'm gonna fix this stupid streaming to the wrong channel thing soon. So thanks everybody. See you.